Please, just one night. I won't ask for more. Mara's voice cracked in the rain, small and trembling, almost swallowed by the downpour that plastered her dark hair to her face. She shifted from foot to foot on the slick pavement, her hands clutching the rounded curve of her belly, as if that small, steady weight could anchor her in the storm around her. The alley was narrow, lined with rusting fire escapes and walls streaked by years of rain, the puddles reflecting the weak glow of a single flickering streetlight. Her knock sounded harsh, metallic, reverberating through the empty street and against the heavy steel door of the Steelhawks clubhouse. The echo carried farther than she expected, slicing through the soft hum of distant engines and the occasional siren. Inside, the clubhouse smelled of oil, gasoline, and faint coffee from the small machine Leo Hunter had fired up hours before. The air was warm, tinged with leather polish and the faint scent of old tobacco. Leo, tall and solidly built, ran a calloused hand over a chrome engine part, his eyes scanning for any imperfections. Marco, wiry with sharp features, sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully oiling the exposed gears of a vintage Harley, while Finn, younger and wiry but with quick, watchful eyes, tightened a chain on a freshly tuned bike. The knock made them freeze simultaneously. It was not the casual visitor or drunk who sometimes wandered to their door. It was urgent, insistent, and fear-laden. "That doesn't sound like someone asking for directions," Leo muttered, voice low, almost a growl, alert and instinctive. He stepped closer to the door, peering out just enough to see a figure through the alley light. There she was, drenched from head to toe, her coat plastered to her skin, the rain dripping in rivulets from her hair onto her shoulders. Her face was pale, streaked with water, in the faint redness of cold, her eyes wide, almost panicked. Mara's lips moved, but only a faint whisper came through the storm. I just need a place for one night," she said again, louder this time, desperation cutting through the words like a knife. Marco glanced at Finn. Finn's shoulders tensed, his usual playful smirk absent. "Looks like trouble, or maybe trouble's already found her," Finn said, voice careful, eyes softening despite the words. He grabbed a rag, wiping his hands slowly, thinking of ways to offer help without overstepping. Leo stepped back, silently signaling the others to stay calm. He opened the door wider, the smell of rain mixing with the warm clubhouse air, letting Mara step inside. The sudden warmth was almost shocking, washing over her like a wave. For the first time that night, her shivering slowed. The metallic clatter of the door closing behind her echoed softly. She let out a shaky breath, the sound almost drowned by the rain still hammering the roof outside. The three men watched silently. Leo's eyes scanned her, noticing the tension in her shoulders, the slight quiver of her hands, the rapid beat of her pulse. Marco, ever the detail-oriented one, observed her movements, the way she hesitated before sitting on a crate, the subtle shifting of her weight, the nervous tapping of her shoes on the wet floor. Finn knelt beside a small heater, sliding it closer, quietly ensuring she could feel some comfort in the cold, damp night. I'm Mara," she whispered finally, voice low, careful, almost afraid to speak. "Please, I have nowhere else to go. Just for one night. I promise." Her hands instinctively covered her belly, protective, as if that small life inside her were the only thing she could truly shield from the world. Leo nodded slowly, the calm weight of his presence filling the room. "All right, Mara," he said, voice steady, measured. "You're safe here tonight." There was no exaggeration, no theatrics, just the clear, unshakable promise in his tone that spoke louder than any words could. Marco and Finn moved quietly. Marco pulled an old cot from the storage room, tattered but clean, placing it in a corner near a wall heater. Finn adjusted a padded stool and brought over a blanket, laying it neatly over the cot. Mara's lips trembled as she looked at them, a flicker of hope passing through her fearful eyes. She had expected suspicion, rejection, maybe even anger, but not this quiet, practical kindness. Leo poured her a cup of warm tea, the steam rising gently, mingling with the scent of leather and engine oil. "Drink this slowly. You'll need it," he said, carefully placing the cup in her hands. Mara's fingers wrapped around it instinctively, the heat seeping into her chilled skin, offering comfort more profound than words. Outside, the rain continued its relentless rhythm, but inside, the Steelhawks clubhouse became a small refuge. The soft hum of the heater, the faint clatter of tools, and the occasional low murmur of the men moving about created a steady, grounding presence. Mara sipped her tea slowly, trying to steady her breathing. For the first time in days, she didn't feel hunted. The weight on her shoulders felt slightly lighter, held in place by the silent, watchful presence of three men who had taken her in without question. Leo finally leaned against the workbench, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the small room. "Get some rest," he said, calm but firm. "Tomorrow we figure out the rest. For now, just breathe. You're safe." Mara nodded slowly, clutching the blanket around her shoulders, the warmth of the small cot and the quiet of the garage giving her a moment of peace she hadn't known in weeks. Outside, the city slept under the storm, unaware of the small sanctuary hidden in an alley, where rain and fear had been met with leather, motorcycles, and the unexpected kindness of those who rode not for themselves, but for the honor of protecting others. Mara settled onto the cot, her body sinking slightly into the worn mattress. The blanket Finn had brought up was warm, almost heavy with comfort, and the small heater beside her hummed softly, warding off the chill that had settled into her bones from the rain outside. She hugged her knees for a moment, staring at the faint shadows the garage lights cast across the walls lined with vintage motorcycles, chrome gleaming even in the dim light. The Iron Eagles patch on the leather jackets hanging nearby caught her eye, symbols of a brotherhood she had never thought she'd encounter in her life. Leo leaned against the workbench, watching her quietly. There was no rush, no judgment. He could see the way her hands trembled when she adjusted the blanket, the tiny inhale she let out, as though trying to release all the fear she'd carried through the storm. "You're safe here," he repeated, softer this time, almost to himself. "No one's going to touch you." Marco moved to the small kitchenette area, humming faintly as he boiled water for tea. He kept glancing back at Mara, noting the careful way she touched her belly, the way she flinched slightly at the creak of a floorboard. It wasn't her imagination. Danger had been close. He could see it in her eyes, the silent terror of someone who'd been running for too long. Finn, meanwhile, went to the garage corner where a small cot and padded stool had been arranged for her. He picked up a folded blanket from a crate and placed it neatly over the cot, making sure Mara had something to cover her feet, still damp from the rain outside. "You'll probably need this," he said quietly. She looked up at him, eyes wide, and gave a faint nod, almost too overwhelmed to speak. Mara finally managed a small, shaky sigh. I didn't expect anyone to care," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the faint hum of the heater and the soft dripping of water from the rain-soaked coats hanging near the door. Leo's eyes softened. "Most people won't, but some of us, we look out for each other." "That's how it works here," he said. The simplicity of his words struck her. No lectures, no pity, just truth, spoken by someone who lived it every day. After a moment, Leo gestured toward a chair near the cot. "Sit if you want. I'll get you something to eat. You must be starving." Mara nodded silently, lowering herself slowly onto the cot. Marco returned with a small plate of food, scrambled eggs with a warm tortilla on the side, something he'd whipped up quickly. Finn brought over a glass of water, placing it gently on a crate beside her cot. Mara stared at the meal for a moment, unsure if she should eat, then finally took a small bite. The warmth, the taste, it was the first simple act of care she had experienced in weeks, and her eyes filled slightly as she swallowed. The rain outside continued, relentless, tapping against the roof with a steady rhythm. Yet inside the clubhouse, there was a calm that felt almost unreal. Mara listened to the distant rumble of engines far down the street, the occasional flicker of lightning illuminating the bikes and tools. She realized she could hear herself breathing without the constant clench of fear she had carried for days. Leo pulled up a stool and sat nearby, arms resting on his knees. "You don't have to tell us everything now," he said softly. "But if you want to, we're listening." Mara hesitated, her throat tight, then finally spoke, voice trembling but urgent. It's, it's my husband. He, he's been angry for months. Since he lost his job, he's not himself anymore. Last night, he, he threw a chair at me. Her words caught in her throat, tears welling in her eyes. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't. Marco's eyes darkened with quiet resolve, his jaw tightening. Finn's hands rested calmly on his knees, but his eyes were sharp, attentive, scanning her for any signs of further distress. Leo leaned back slightly, the weight of his presence grounding the room. You don't have to go back tonight, he said, or tomorrow. Not until you're ready. The way he said it, firm but calm, carried more promise than any arrangement could. Finn moved closer, placing the padded stool near Mara's cot. Here, he said, if you need to sit up, get comfortable. We'll make sure you're okay. She nodded, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. Diesel, a senior rider who had been quietly fixing a bike in the far corner, glanced over and added in his gravelly voice. And if you need warmth, we've got a space heater. Garage is a little cold at night. Mara's lips quivered, a small smile flickering briefly before she wiped her tears. Time passed slowly, the storm outside showing no sign of stopping. Mara sipped her water, nibbled on the tortilla, and watched the three men move around, quietly maintaining the garage, checking bikes, pouring tea, and offering small gestures of care without fanfare. She had expected harsh words, suspicion, maybe rejection, but not this quiet, steady kindness. For the first time in days, she felt the faintest trace of safety, the first time she had allowed herself to breathe without fear. Leo finally stood, stretching slightly, the light catching the worn leather of his jacket. Rest now, he said. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. For tonight, you're not alone. Mara hugged the blanket tighter, nodding slowly. Finn adjusted the stool, making sure the heater's warmth reached her cot. Marco cleaned a few tools nearby, the quiet clinks of metal oddly comforting. Outside, the city seemed vast and indifferent, streets slick and dark. But inside the Steelhawks clubhouse, Mara found a momentary sanctuary. Rain pelted the roof, lightning flashed briefly, and thunder rolled in the distance. But she felt for the first time that she could survive the night. The subtle hum of engines and the steady presence of men who had no reason to care about her became a lullaby, grounding her in a reality where she was protected, seen, and safe. The night deepened, and the storm outside had not eased. Rain pelted the alley with a relentless rhythm, the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the rows of motorcycles parked neatly against the garage walls. Mara lay on the cot, wrapped in the blanket Finn had placed over her, staring at the ceiling. Her mind raced, recalling the moments she had left behind. Travis yelling, slamming doors, the terrifying flash of the chair hurtling toward her. Every memory made her flinch, but inside the garage, surrounded by the warmth and quiet presence of the Steelhawks, those fears felt distant, yet not entirely gone. Leo leaned against the workbench, watching her from across the room. He knew the kind of fear that ran through someone who had been hunted, even by someone they once loved. Mara, he said quietly, careful not to startle her, do you want to talk about him? About what happened? Her hands tightened on the blanket. She hesitated, swallowing hard. I think he's dangerous, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know if he'll stop. I don't know if he'll hurt me again. Marco stepped closer, the dim light catching the sharp lines of his face. You won't have to find out, he said firmly. Not here. Not tonight. We'll make sure of that. He didn't sound threatening, just resolute, a quiet promise that echoed in the garage. Finn nodded, moving to adjust the heater so its warmth spread further across the cot, covering Mara's damp legs. Even these small gestures mattered. Mara could feel the safety surrounding her for the first time in weeks. Mara exhaled shakily. I can't go back. I can't stay in that apartment. Not after last night. Leo stepped closer, his tall frame casting a reassuring shadow over her. You won't have to, he said, his tone measured, calm. You're not wandering the streets. You're not going back there. For now, you stay with us. You're safe. There was a quiet knock at the back garage door. Diesel, the senior writer, glanced up. "I'll check it," he muttered in his gravelly voice. Moments later, he returned, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "It's nothing. Just the storm knocking over some debris outside." Leo nodded, the tension in the room easing slightly, but Mara's heart jumped at the sound. Every sudden noise reminded her of the nights she had spent hiding in shadows, fear always ready to strike. Finn crouched near her cot, speaking softly. "You don't have to face any of it alone," he said, his eyes steady. "We're not just riders. We watch out for each other. You'll see." Mara's lips trembled. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let go of the fear she'd carried for so long, but the memories clung stubbornly. Leo finally spoke again, his voice calm but carrying authority. "Tomorrow we'll make a plan. You don't have to do anything tonight but rest." Mara nodded, letting the blanket slide around her shoulders. She could feel the weight of exhaustion pressing down, her muscles slackening for the first time in days. The cot felt strange but comforting, the padded stool Finn had arranged providing a little extra support if she needed to sit up. Hours passed quietly. Diesel returned to his corner, cleaning parts and keeping an eye on the rain through the garage's small windows. Marco occasionally moved to check Mara, offering a cup of tea or adjusting the blanket. Finn sat nearby, his presence subtle but constant, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Mara listened to the storm outside, but inside, the steady hum of the heater, the faint metallic clinks from the workbench, and the occasional soft murmur of the bikers created a rhythm that soothed her frayed nerves. At some point, Mara spoke again, her voice low, almost a whisper. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I don't have family here. I don't know anyone who can help me." Leo looked at her, the lines of his face softening. "Then we'll be your family for now," he said simply. "We've got lawyers we trust, people who know how to protect someone in your situation. You won't have to face him alone." Marco added, "We'll document everything, keep track of his actions if necessary. You won't have to go back into that storm. Not outside, not inside. Not ever if we can prevent it." Mara swallowed hard, her throat tight. The idea of safety, of someone planning ahead to protect her, felt foreign but welcome. She had never imagined strangers, especially a group of bikers, would go to such lengths. Leo finally stood, moving to the workbench. "Rest now," he said again, repeating the promise, the anchor she had clung to since entering the garage. "We'll handle the rest tomorrow." Mara closed her eyes, feeling the blanket snug against her, the heat from the small heater at her feet, and the quiet presence of people who cared. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the Steelhawks clubhouse, Mara finally let herself relax, if only for a few hours. Rain battered the roof, lightning flashed, and thunder rolled in the distance. Yet she slept lightly, comforted by the knowledge that she was no longer alone. The bikers, Leo, Marco, Finn, Diesel, were her guardians for the night, a shield of leather, steel, and unwavering moral resolve. For Mara, the night was long, but for the first time in weeks it felt safe, and that small seed of hope, planted amidst rain, oil, and chrome, promised that the morning could bring more than fear. It might bring a chance to start again. Morning arrived slowly, pale sunlight seeping through the high windows of the Steelhawks clubhouse, catching dust motes in the warm, quiet air. The storm had passed, leaving the city slick with rain and the streets shimmering under the first light. Mara stirred on the cot, her body heavy with exhaustion but eased by the warmth and safety of the garage. The small heater hummed gently, Finn still seated nearby, keeping watch, his eyes soft with quiet reassurance. Leo Hunter leaned against the workbench, sipping coffee, his tall frame relaxed but alert. "Morning," he said simply. Mara looked up, blinking sleep from her eyes. The familiarity of their voices, the calm in the garage, it was almost surreal. She had expected suspicion, maybe questions or judgment, but instead she found herself greeted by steady, practical care. Marco entered from the kitchenette, carrying a plate with eggs, warm tortillas, and slices of fruit. "Eat," he said, placing the plate on the crate beside her cot. "You need it." Mara hesitated for a moment, then took a small bite. the taste grounding her in a reality she hadn't felt in days. The simple act of breakfast felt profound, a small normality in the chaos of her life. As Mara ate, the sound of engines rolling softly outside drew her attention. She squinted toward the garage door and saw two more riders arriving, their leather jackets bearing the familiar Steelhawks insignia. Diesel, who had been quietly cleaning his bike, called out a greeting. "Jonas, Wrench, glad you could make it early," he said. The newcomers nodded, taking off their helmets and shaking off the last drops of rain. Jonas, a large man with a grizzled beard, approached Mara and offered a small padded stool. "You might need a little comfort while we sort things out," he said gently. Wrench, younger and wiry, set up a small space heater beside her cot, its warmth quickly filling the corner of the garage. Mara's eyes widened. The combined effort of these bikers, their attention to her safety and comfort, was overwhelming in a way she hadn't anticipated. Leo cleared his throat and spoke, calm and measured. "Mara, we need to make a plan for today. You're safe here, but we have to think about what comes next." Mara nodded, swallowing hard. I don't know what to do," she whispered. Her hands instinctively covered her belly, protective. "I can't face him. I don't have anyone else." Marco stepped closer, crouching slightly so he was at eye level. "You have us," he said firmly. "And we have people we trust, lawyers, friends, anyone who can help make sure you're protected. You won't be facing this alone." Mara's lips quivered, tears threatening again, but she felt a flicker of hope. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let go of the fear she had carried for weeks. Leo moved to a nearby desk and picked up his phone. "I've called someone who can help legally," he said. "Her name's Karen. She's dealt with situations like yours before. She'll guide us on the steps we need to take. Protective orders, documentation, everything." Mara nodded slowly, overwhelmed by the notion that someone could provide real help, not just temporary shelter. Jonas and Diesel worked quietly, moving tools and supplies aside to make the garage feel more like a temporary refuge than a working space. Wrench adjusted the heater again, ensuring the warmth spread evenly, and Finn handed Mara a fresh cup of tea. The care in every small action, the thoughtfulness without words, made Mara realize how seriously these men were taking her safety. Leo spoke again, voice calm but firm. "First, you need to rest and eat. Then we'll figure out the next steps. Karen will be here later today to talk about protective orders and documentation. We'll record everything necessary. You won't have to go back to that apartment. Not alone. Not at all." Mara sipped her tea slowly, the warmth seeping into her chilled body. She glanced around the garage, at the motorcycles gleaming in the morning light, at the men moving around her with quiet efficiency, at the tools and leather jackets that suddenly felt less intimidating and more like a shield. She felt safe for the first time in weeks. Will he find me here?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. Leo shook his head. "Not if we can prevent it," he said simply. "We'll make sure of that. You're not going anywhere alone, Mara. We'll watch and we'll plan. That's what we do." The room was quiet for a moment, save for the hum of the heaters and the soft clinking of tools. Jonas leaned over to Mara, his voice low but reassuring. "You don't have to worry about the night anymore. That's done. The rest, we'll handle together." Mara nodded, feeling a small weight lift from her shoulders. By mid-morning, Karen arrived. She was a calm, composed woman in her 40s, carrying a briefcase and a reassuring smile. Leo introduced her to Mara. "Mara, this is Karen. She knows how to make sure you're safe legally. She'll guide us on the next steps." Karen crouched slightly to Mara's level, her voice gentle. "You're safe here," she said, "and we're going to make sure it stays that way." Mara let herself relax slightly, watching as the bikers, Leo, Marco, Finn, Diesel, Jonas, and Wrench, coordinated with Karen. Every small action, every gentle word, every careful adjustment of her cot or blanket reinforced the idea that she was no longer alone. The morning sunlight warmed the garage, blending with the hum of engines, the faint scent of leather and oil, and the quiet buzz of purpose. For Mara, the Steel Hawks were no longer just strangers who had taken her in. They were guardians, strategists, protectors. And for the first time in a long time, She allowed herself to imagine a day when she could feel safe beyond the walls of the garage. Karen settled into the garage, placing her briefcase on a sturdy workbench, and opened it with quiet efficiency. Mara watched her, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension in her eyes. The woman exuded calm authority, and Mara felt immediately that she could trust her. Leo leaned against the wall, arms crossed, observing silently. Marco and Finn stood nearby, alert, ready to help with anything necessary, while Diesel, Jonas, and Wrench continued tidying and adjusting the garage to ensure it remained a safe and organized space. First things first, Karen began, her voice measured and steady. We need to make sure you have a clear record of everything that's happened. Dates, times, incidents, and any witnesses. This will be important if you need a protective order or other legal measures. She looked at Mara kindly. It may seem overwhelming, but we'll take it step by step. Mara nodded slowly, trying to steady her hands. I remember most of it, she whispered. I don't know how to write it down properly. Karen smiled reassuringly. That's why I'm here. You tell me, we write it down, and together we'll make it official. No pressure. We'll do it at your pace. Leo stepped closer. We'll help too, he said firmly. Anything you need, Mara. Documentation, safety measures, whatever it takes. We've got your back. Marco pulled a notebook and pen from his jacket pocket and handed it to Mara. Just start with the basics, he said. Where it happened, what he did, anything you remember. We'll fill in the gaps. Mara took a deep breath and began to recount the incidents. Each detail, Travis losing his job, the sudden outbursts, the night he threw the chair, felt heavier when spoken aloud, yet lighter because it was heard by people who believed her and intended to protect her. Finn sat beside her, offering small reassurances when her voice trembled. Diesel quietly set up another heater nearby, ensuring warmth reached every corner, and Jonas organized the scattered papers and pens to keep the workspace orderly. Karen listened carefully, typing notes on her laptop while occasionally glancing up at Mira. This is important, she said softly, not just for legal protection, but to make sure that the authorities understand the seriousness of the situation. You are not alone. These men here are your witnesses and support. Mara looked at each of the bikers around her, realizing how much care and attention they had devoted to her safety. The sight was overwhelming. I can't believe you're all doing this for me, she whispered, eyes wide. Leo's jaw tightened slightly. It's not about disbelief. It's about what's right. Someone needed to step up, and that someone is us. He gestured around the garage, the motorcycles, the tools, the patches on the wall that represented years of loyalty and brotherhood. We look out for each other. You're part of that now, Mara, at least for as long as you need. Karen paused, then addressed Mara directly. Once we have this record, we can file for a protective order. That means legally he cannot come near you, your home, or your workplace. We can also arrange for temporary housing if necessary, and we'll provide guidance on documenting any future incidents. The goal is to ensure your safety and peace of mind. Mara nodded, trying to absorb the information. And I won't have to go back there? She asked, voice trembling. Finn shook his head firmly. Not unless you want to. And even then, we'll plan it carefully. You'll have us, and anyone who needs to be there legally will be aware. You're not going in blind. The morning passed quietly, filled with small acts of preparation. Diesel and Jonas moved around the garage, creating extra space and ensuring Mara had a comfortable corner to sit in while they worked. Marco and Finn assisted her with filling out forms, helping her recall exact times and events. Leo kept watch, occasionally checking the street through the small window, ensuring no one suspicious was nearby. By midday, they had completed a detailed account of the incidents, each page carefully reviewed and organized. Karen smiled reassuringly. This is excellent, she said. We have everything we need to start the legal process. And more importantly, we've established a network of support. You won't be facing this alone, Mara. Mara felt a flicker of relief. The fear that had been suffocating her for weeks, the constant anxiety of what might happen next, seemed to ease slightly. The combination of practical help, legal guidance, An unwavering moral support from the Steel Hawks created a sense of safety she hadn't known existed. Leo finally addressed her, voice calm but firm. Rest now, Mara. You've done enough for today. The next steps will be handled carefully, and we'll be with you through every one of them. For tonight, just sleep. You've earned it. Mara leaned back on the cot, wrapping the blanket around herself. The heaters hummed softly. The sunlight warmed the garage, and the quiet presence of the bikers, combined with Karen's steady guidance, made her feel grounded for the first time in weeks. Outside, the city buzzed with normal morning activity, unaware that in a small alley, a group of riders had formed an invisible shield around a frightened woman, protecting her with loyalty, discipline, and collective care. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the garage windows, casting long, warm streaks across the motorcycles and workbenches. Outside, the city hummed with the quiet chaos of post-storm life, cars splashing through puddles, distant construction noise, the occasional shout. But inside the Steelhawks clubhouse, time moved differently. It was deliberate, measured, organized, and most importantly, safe. Mara sat at a small table Leo had cleared, surrounded by Marco, Finn, Diesel, Jonas, and Wrench. The air smelled faintly of oil, leather, and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee. Karen leaned over her laptop, typing quickly, her voice calm but firm. We filed the initial protective order paperwork electronically, she explained, looking up at Mara. This means legally, Travis cannot come near your home or contact you. We'll get confirmation soon, and once it's approved, it's enforceable immediately. Mara's eyes widened slightly. So, he can't find me, she asked, voice trembling. Finn reached over, placing a reassuring hand near hers. Not if we do this right, he said. We'll make sure everything's covered. Leo stood and moved toward the garage door, peering out through the small window. He returned with a nod. No suspicious vehicles outside. We're clear, but we'll keep watch just in case. Diesel adjusted the heaters, ensuring Mara's corner of the garage remained warm and comfortable, while Jonas and Wrench moved some crates to create a more secure, semi-enclosed space near her cot. Every detail, every small action, was part of a larger plan, making Mara feel protected, grounded, and free to focus on her own well-being. Karen glanced at Mara. We'll also arrange for a temporary safe location, she said, somewhere private, where he cannot reach you until everything is officially settled. We'll coordinate with law enforcement if necessary, but with the bikers' support, we can keep this under control. Mara swallowed hard, the reality of being truly safe settling over her like a warm blanket. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. Marco gave a faint smile. You don't have to, he said. Seeing you safe, that's thanks enough. Finn handed Mara a cup of warm tea, carefully keeping it steady as she took it. The simple gesture, so small yet so meaningful, grounded her. She sipped slowly, feeling the warmth seep into her chilled body. The hum of the heater, the soft rustle of paper from Karen's laptop, and the occasional metallic clink from Diesel's work in the corner created a rhythm that felt oddly like a heartbeat. For the first time in weeks, Mara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could rest. Leo gathered the riders together. We need a plan for visibility, he said. If anyone, Travis or otherwise, tries to find her, we'll need to intercept or alert authorities immediately. Diesel, Jonas, Wrench, you'll rotate surveillance in the alley and around the block. Marco and Finn, stay inside, keep Mara comfortable, and be ready to move her if needed. I'll coordinate communication. Mara listened, fascinated by the coordination. These were bikers, yes, but the discipline, the focus, the moral responsibility, they were meticulous in a way she hadn't expected. Karen looked up from her laptop. We should also document everything, she said. Any communication from him, any attempts to locate her, we'll log it. It will strengthen the case for the protective order and any further legal action. Mara nodded, grateful for the practical approach. Every small measure felt like a shield forming around her, each biker a piece of that shield. The morning gradually slipped into early afternoon. Leo checked Mara's cot, ensuring she was comfortable. Eat something, he said, setting down a plate of eggs and toast. You need strength if we're going to keep this going. She hesitated, then took a small bite, appreciating the normalcy of a simple meal. Marco poured a cup of coffee for himself, watching her with quiet attentiveness. "You've been through a lot," he said gently. "Let's make sure it doesn't happen again." Outside, a faint hum of engines could be heard as Jonas and Wrench completed a quick check of the surrounding streets. They returned quickly, reporting nothing suspicious. Diesel returned to his corner, wiping his hands on a rag, but keeping one eye on Mara, ensuring her safety never wavered. Finn stayed close to her cot, adjusting the blanket and passing her another cup of tea. The combined presence of 6 bikers, each acting in unison with discipline and care, created a cocoon of security Mara had never imagined possible. Karen glanced at Mara again. "This will take time," she said. "But with the support system here, you're not alone. You have people who care, people who will act immediately if anything happens." "That matters more than you realize." Mara looked around, seeing nods of agreement, quiet determination, and the moral commitment etched on every biker's face. For the first time, she truly felt the weight of protection, not fear. By late afternoon, Mara finally leaned back on her cot, exhaustion catching up. She hugged the blanket around her shoulders, letting herself relax. Leo, Finn, Marco, Diesel, Jonas, and Wrench continued their quiet vigil, occasionally moving, adjusting heaters, organizing paperwork, or simply sitting nearby. The garage felt warm, safe, and alive, not just a shelter, but a fortress built from loyalty, discipline, and collective moral responsibility. Outside, the city's afternoon bustle carried on, unaware that in a small alley, a woman's life had been shielded by a group of bikers who had taken a moral stand. Mara finally let herself exhale fully, the first deep breath of relief she had taken in weeks. The first small steps of real safety were in motion, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where fear did not rule her life. By late afternoon, the sunlight had softened to a warm golden hue, spilling across the rows of motorcycles and glinting off chrome handlebars. Mara had moved from the cot to a padded stool Finn had set beside the heater. Sipping tea slowly, while watching the bikers organize the garage with careful precision, Leo stood near the entrance, phone in hand, speaking quietly into it, coordinating patrols and checking on updates from law enforcement. The atmosphere was calm, measured, yet charged with a subtle intensity, a quiet readiness to act if needed. Mara's fingers traced the edge of her cup, her eyes flitting between the bikers and the motorcycles. The garage, once intimidating with its sheer size and rows of polished bikes, now felt like a sanctuary. Each patch on the jackets, each helmet placed carefully on a shelf, represented a man or woman who lived by a code that now extended to protecting her. She swallowed hard, realizing how deeply she had come to rely on their presence. Marco crouched beside her, voice gentle. "We've mapped out potential routes you might take if you need to leave the garage for appointments or errands," he explained, pulling out a folded city map. Red lines marked the streets, green circles indicated safe checkpoints, and small arrows traced paths that minimized exposure. Mara leaned in, tracing the lines with her finger. "This feels like planning a mission," she whispered, a faint smile breaking through her anxiety. Marco chuckled softly. "In a way it is," he said, "except the mission is your safety, and everyone here is committed to seeing it through." Finn adjusted the space heater near Mara, ensuring the warmth wrapped around her damp coat. "We'll rotate," he said, nodding toward Diesel and Jonas, who had already set up observation points near the alley and surrounding streets. "Someone will always be watching, ensuring you're safe whenever you move outside these walls." Mara's chest felt tight, both with relief and the lingering fear of what could have happened if she had nowhere to go. The presence of disciplined, watchful riders around her created a sense of invincibility she hadn't known she could feel. Karen, seated at a nearby workbench, tapped her laptop keyboard. "We've scheduled a meeting with social services and law enforcement for tomorrow," she explained. "This is to establish a safe plan for temporary housing and to ensure there's a legal record of all incidents. You won't have to handle this on your own." Mara's voice trembled slightly. I can't believe how much support there is. I've never had anything like this." Leo's eyes softened. "Most people wouldn't, Mara. But some of us, we know what it's like to need protection, and we act. As the afternoon wore on, the bikers continued their meticulous preparation. Jonas checked the exterior of the garage, ensuring visibility from the street was limited and that the alley remained clear of potential hazards. Diesel organized extra blankets, snacks, and water, anticipating that Mara might need them during outings. Wrench reviewed the rotation schedule for observation, coordinating with Finn and Marco to ensure that someone would always be present whenever she left the garage. Mara finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. I, I want to do what Karen says. I want to feel safe. Really safe. Marco nodded. And you will. Every step we take is about making sure you get there. We're not rushing, and nothing will happen without your consent. Mara's hands shook slightly as she set down her tea. The weight of responsibility she had carried alone for weeks was easing, replaced by a cautious but growing confidence. Karen closed her laptop and turned toward her. Tomorrow we'll begin coordinating with local authorities and social services. But tonight, we focus on comfort, rest, and building a sense of security. That's just as important as any legal step. Mara nodded, letting the words sink in. The idea that safety wasn't just about law or documentation, but also about feeling grounded and supported, was a revelation to her. Outside, the city's evening lights began to glow, reflecting on wet streets and puddles. Mara leaned back on her padded stool, feeling warmth from the heater, the gentle hum of conversation, and the steady presence of the bikers around her. Each one moved with purpose, checking doors, rotating patrols, adjusting blankets, monitoring maps. But never once did they make her feel like a burden. Instead, she felt enveloped in a protective rhythm, each motion and glance a reminder that she was not alone. Leo approached her, voice low but firm. Rest if you can, Mara. The next steps will be tomorrow. For now, let the garage be your sanctuary. We'll be with you every moment. Mara nodded, closing her eyes briefly. The gentle whir of the heaters, the distant city noises, and the quiet organization of the bikers around her created a cocoon of safety and trust. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a life without fear. Not complete freedom yet, but a foundation strong enough to build upon. As the evening deepened, Mara sipped her tea, listening to the soft clinks of tools, the occasional laughter or murmur from the bikers, and the subtle rumble of motorcycles in the distance. Outside, the streets were quiet, but inside the Steelhawks clubhouse, a different world existed. A world where loyalty, discipline, and moral courage formed an invisible shield around her, ensuring that the night was not just bearable, but safe. The morning light filtered softly through the garage windows, illuminating the rows of motorcycles and the scattered tools, papers, and blankets that had become a part of Mara's new sanctuary. Today was different. Today, she would leave the garage for the first time since seeking refuge with the Steelhawks. The idea filled her with a mix of apprehension and cautious hope. Leo, Marco, Finn, Diesel, Jonas, and Wrench moved with quiet purpose around her, each rider preparing for the journey ahead. Leo approached Mara first, his voice calm but authoritative. We've mapped out the safest route to the appointment, he explained, pointing at a printed map with highlighted streets, alternate paths, and safe points where a rider would wait. We've minimized exposure and potential risk. Jonas and Wrench will lead the way on motorcycles. Diesel and I will follow behind, and Finn and Marco will stay close to you in the car. You won't be alone for a second, Mara nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The meticulous planning reassured her. Each street, each turn, each pause had been considered. It feels like I'm part of a team, she whispered, her voice shaky but sincere. Marco crouched beside her, placing a reassuring hand on hers. You are, he said, and we've got your back, every step of the way. Today is just the first of many safe trips. Karen joined them, carrying a folder with documents and forms Mara might need at her appointment. Remember, she said, her tone gentle, this is about your safety and comfort. You don't have to rush. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. We'll handle everything else. You just focus on yourself. Mara swallowed hard, the weight of weeks of fear beginning to lift as she realized that for the first time, she wasn't alone in facing the world. Outside the garage, the morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp streets and fresh rain. Jonas and Wrench mounted their motorcycles, engines rumbling softly. Diesel, Leo, and Finn organized the car, ensuring Mara would be comfortable and protected inside. Marco stayed close to Mara, ready to guide her through the first steps out of the sanctuary she had grown used to over the past days. As Mara stepped out of the garage, she felt a mixture of fear and relief. The sun's warmth contrasted with the coolness of the morning, and the sound of distant traffic reminded her of how much the outside world had seemed threatening just days ago. Jonas and Wrench led the way, riding slightly ahead to scout the route and ensure safety, while Diesel, Leo, and Finn followed in the car, the hum of the engine steady and reassuring. Karen rode alongside in a separate vehicle, ready to assist with any legal or practical matters during the outing. Mara glanced at her, feeling a wave of gratitude for the woman's calm guidance. I, I think I can do this, Mara whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. Marco squeezed her shoulder gently. You can, he said, and we'll be with you the entire way. Every street, every turn, every stop. We're covering it all. The route was carefully chosen, avoiding crowded streets and areas where Mara might feel vulnerable. At each safe point, a rider waited, scanning the surroundings, ready to communicate any potential issues. The coordination was precise, disciplined, and surprisingly comforting. Mara felt her tension ease slightly as she realized that every detail had been considered. She was not just being escorted, she was being protected by a team that had taken her safety as seriously as their own lives. Along the way, small gestures reinforced her sense of security. Diesel adjusted the car's climate control so she would remain comfortable. Finn kept a watchful eye on her through the rearview mirror, and Marco whispered occasional reassurances. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that in a small convoy of motorcycles and a car, a frightened woman was reclaiming her sense of agency, guided by the moral discipline and loyalty of a biker crew. Karen spoke softly from the passenger seat beside Mara. Remember, this is just the beginning. Each step you take safely builds confidence. Each act of courage, even small, strengthens your position. Mara nodded, feeling the weight of fear slowly give way to cautious determination. She realized that her journey toward true safety was not a solo effort. It was a carefully coordinated mission, with bikers, legal guidance, and her own courage working together. By the time they reached the first checkpoint, Mara felt a small but powerful sense of accomplishment. She had left the garage, navigated streets that had seemed threatening, and arrived without incident. Each rider around her exuded calm authority, a visible manifestation of the protection and loyalty she had come to rely on. For the first time, she allowed herself to breathe fully, the tension in her body easing as she realized she was truly not alone. As the morning progressed, Mara's confidence grew, bolstered by the unwavering support of the Steelhawks and Karen. Each stop, each turn, each interaction was a reinforcement of her new reality, one where she could move through the world without fear, guided and protected by people who had taken a moral stand to ensure her safety. And for Mara, that realization was more powerful than any reassurance, more grounding than any promise. It was proof that fear could be replaced with trust, discipline, and loyalty. The late morning sunlight cast a warm glow across the streets as Mara's small convoy moved carefully through the city. The route had been planned meticulously, yet the unpredictability of the outside world still pressed against her nerves. She gripped the edge of her seat, the sensation of motion both reassuring and unnerving. Finn, driving, kept glances on the rearview mirror, his eyes scanning for any unusual movement. Jonas and Wrench led the way, riding with quiet precision, alert to every car, pedestrian, or sound that might signal danger. Mara's thoughts drifted involuntarily to Travis. The very idea of him searching for her made her heart race, though she had been told repeatedly that the protective order and their careful planning reduced any real risk. Marco sat beside her, noting the tension in her posture. "You're doing great," he said softly. "Every calm breath, every small step, that's progress. Focus on what you can control, and we'll handle the rest." Mara nodded, swallowing hard. The reassurance of disciplined focus around her was beginning to outweigh the fear that had gripped her for weeks. As the convoy approached a crowded intersection, Mara noticed a figure in the distance that made her chest tighten. A man standing near a coffee shop, looking around in a way that sent a familiar shiver through her. She froze, the recognition immediate. "Finn, stop," she whispered urgently. Finn's eyes narrowed and he eased the car to a slow, cautious stop behind a parked delivery van. Jonas and Wrench, sensing the tension, slowed their motorcycles as well, scanning the street ahead. Karen, riding in the passenger seat behind Mara, leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Stay composed, Mara. Don't panic. We'll handle it." Mara's hands trembled as she clutched her blanket tighter. The figure, while standing innocuously, radiated the threat she had feared for weeks. Leo, observing from a nearby vantage point on a motorcycle parked at the curb, immediately signaled the other bikers via discreet hand gestures. Each movement was precise, silent, yet communicated a clear message. "We are aware, we are ready, we are protecting you." Jonas and Wrench subtly repositioned themselves, creating a visible presence while maintaining safe distances. Diesel and Marco adjusted their positions inside the car, ensuring Mara had a clear exit if necessary. The coordination was almost instinctual, each rider understanding their role without a word being spoken aloud. Mara watched wide-eyed as a team trained not just in motorcycles, but in loyalty and protection executed their plan with disciplined grace. The figure seemed to hesitate, scanning the street as if uncertain. Leo's calm voice carried over the radio, a single directive: maintain distance, no engagement unless necessary. Report. Mara realized the gravity of the moment. Her safety depended on these riders' judgment, their moral responsibility, and their disciplined execution. She inhaled slowly, focusing on her breath, trusting the process. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. The man finally turned away, his attention drawn elsewhere, leaving the intersection and Mara's immediate surroundings clear. The convoy resumed movement, but the tension lingered, replaced gradually by a profound relief. Mara exhaled deeply, her hands relaxing slightly from the tight grip on her blanket. Finn glanced at her through the rearview mirror, offering a small, reassuring smile. "You did great," he said softly. Karen spoke next, her voice steady, guiding Mara's emotions. "That's exactly why preparation matters. This could have been terrifying if you were alone. But look at what we did. Calm, coordinated, protective. You're learning to trust safety in a new way, and that's just as important as the legal measures." Mara nodded, a small tear escaping her eye. The overwhelming mix of fear, relief, and gratitude made her chest ache. She looked at the bikers around her, Leo, Marco, Finn, Diesel, Jonas, and Wrench, and realized how much their disciplined loyalty, combined with moral courage, had changed her world. The rest of the route proceeded smoothly, but Mara noticed a subtle shift in her confidence. Each careful step, each small act of navigation through potentially threatening streets, reinforced her belief in her own strength, bolstered by the unwavering presence of the Steel Hawks. Karen took notes, quietly documenting the incident for Mara's legal record, while Leo coordinated a slight alteration in their return route to minimize exposure and ensure continued safety. By the time they returned to the garage, Mara felt both exhausted and exhilarated. She had faced a real threat, remained composed, and had been surrounded by people whose loyalty and discipline transformed her fear into a cautious confidence. Diesel adjusted her blanket and handed her a cup of warm tea. Jonas set up a small space heater beside her, and Finn offered a reassuring nod. Marco stayed close, whispering gentle encouragements. Mara sank into the cot, wrapping herself in warmth and relief. I didn't think I could do that," she whispered, voice quivering. Leo crouched beside her, his tone firm but kind. "You did, and you'll do it again. Every step we take together is a lesson in trust, courage, and support. You're not alone, Mara." "Not now. Not ever with us." Mara allowed herself to exhale fully, her body relaxing for the first time in what felt like months. As evening fell, the garage became a quiet refuge once more. The hum of the heaters, the faint scent of leather, the soft murmur of conversation, and the gentle clinking of tools formed a rhythm that grounded Mara. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the small network of protection that had transformed a frightened woman's world into one of safety, discipline, and moral courage. The next morning, the garage was alive with a quiet energy, punctuated by the hum of heaters, the metallic clink of tools, and the low rumble of motorcycles warming up outside. Mara sat at the small table near the heater, a notepad and pen in front of her, while Karen spread out a series of documents on the workbench. Leo, Marco, Finn, Diesel, Jonas, and Wrench moved methodically around the garage, each performing their assigned roles with precision, some checking the exterior, others organizing supplies, all creating a sense of disciplined order that Mara had come to trust. "Today we'll review your safety plan in detail," Karen said, her voice calm but purposeful. "This isn't just about legal measures. It's about understanding potential risks, preparing for different scenarios, and making sure you feel confident in your own ability to stay safe." Mara nodded, gripping the pen tightly. Her heart raced, a mix of anxiety and determination. For the first time, she was not just reacting to fear. She was actively taking part in her protection. Leo stepped forward, pointing to a printed map with highlighted routes, safe points, and alternative streets. "We'll walk through the routes you'll take for appointments, errands, or any outings," he said. "We've marked checkpoints where a rider will wait, and we've considered escape routes in case of unexpected situations. Jonas and Wrench will lead, Diesel and I will follow, and Finn and Marco stay close in the vehicle. You'll be supported at every step." Mara leaned in, studying the map carefully. "So, if anything happens, there's always someone nearby?" she asked. Leo's expression was firm. "Exactly. You are never alone. And remember, each of these routes has been tested for minimal exposure and maximum safety." Diesel adjusted the space heater beside Mara, ensuring she stayed warm and comfortable. "We've thought of everything," he added, his voice low and steady. "Your comfort and security are our responsibility." Karen organized the legal documents into sections: protective orders, incident logs, emergency contacts, and temporary housing arrangements. "These papers outline every measure in place," she explained. "Familiarize yourself with them. Knowing what resources are available and what steps to take in each scenario will help you feel empowered, not trapped." Mara nodded slowly, realizing that each piece of paper represented a concrete barrier against fear. Marco crouched beside her, offering guidance. "Today we'll also run through some practical exercises," he said. "Small, controlled movements, like walking from the car to the appointment, entering buildings safely, and maintaining awareness. It may feel awkward at first, but repetition will build confidence." Mara's eyes widened slightly. "Exercises," she whispered. Finn smiled reassuringly. "Think of it as training for courage," he said. "You've faced fear before, Mara. Now we're teaching your mind and body to act calmly and confidently when it appears again." Outside, Jonas and Wrench performed a mock route, riding at a slow pace while scanning the streets, simulating the journey Mara would take later. Leo coordinated from the garage, monitoring communication and timing checkpoints. Diesel moved supplies and blankets to ensure Mara had everything she might need during the walkthrough. Every motion, every adjustment, every glance was deliberate, creating a rhythm of safety and preparedness. Mara began to feel a shift inside her. Where she had previously felt helpless and fearful, a cautious sense of empowerment was growing. Karen encouraged her to take notes, to ask questions, to speak up about what worried her. Leo emphasized situational awareness and planning, not panic. Marco and Finn demonstrated movement techniques, how to keep distance, how to approach doors safely, how to maintain awareness without appearing fearful. Mara practiced, her movements careful, deliberate, and increasingly confident under their watchful eyes. The morning stretched into afternoon. Mara learned to anticipate potential hazards, to communicate her comfort levels, and to rely on the team while gradually asserting her own independence. Diesel handed her a thermos of tea, Jonas demonstrated safe crossing techniques, and Wrench reviewed signaling methods for alerting riders without drawing attention. Mara was absorbing not only practical skills but also moral lessons in responsibility, discipline, and trust. Karen summarized the session. "The goal is simple: safety, confidence, and self-reliance. You are not alone, but you are learning to act with awareness. Each step you take reinforces your ability to navigate the world safely. This is as much mental preparation as it is physical. Mara nodded, her chest lighter than it had been in months. She realized that her fear was no longer dictating her life. She had allies, a plan, and the knowledge to act deliberately. As evening approached, Mara settled into her cot, wrapping herself in a warm blanket. The garage was quiet, yet alive with a comforting rhythm. Finn adjusting the heater, Diesel organizing supplies, Leo reviewing communications, and Jonas and Wrench prepping for the next day. Mara closed her eyes, reflecting on the day's lessons. She was not just a frightened woman hiding from the world. She was a participant in a carefully coordinated system of protection, supported by bikers whose loyalty, discipline, and moral courage had reshaped her reality. Outside, the city's lights began to glow, reflecting on wet streets and puddles. Inside the Steelhawks clubhouse, Mara felt a sense of control, preparedness, and safety that she had never known. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where fear did not rule her life, and where loyalty, discipline, and moral responsibility were shields she could trust completely. The morning air was crisp and still as Mara approached the garage doors, her steps measured and cautious. Today was a milestone. She would leave the Steelhawks sanctuary for her first fully independent outing, relying on the skills, guidance, and confidence she had been building over the past week. Outside, the motorcycles gleamed under the soft sunlight, engines idling as Leo, Marco, Finn, Diesel, Jonas, and Wrench prepared for a subtle, supportive escort rather than full intervention. Mara's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her coat, wrapping it snugly around her shoulders. Marco walked beside her, his presence steady but non-intrusive. "Remember," he said softly, "you've learned everything you need. We're here for support, not control. You lead this journey." Mara nodded, swallowing hard. The words carried a weight she could feel in her chest. She was in charge now, but safety still surrounded her like an invisible shield. As they moved down the street, Mara kept her eyes forward, noticing the subtle details she had been trained to observe. The positions of parked cars, the pace of pedestrians, the ebb and flow of passing vehicles. Each small observation reinforced her confidence, and she felt a quiet thrill in realizing she could navigate the streets with awareness and calm rather than fear. Jonas and Wrench rode nearby but maintained a respectful distance, ready to respond if needed, but allowing Mara space to assert her own independence. The first checkpoint approached, a small corner cafe where she would stop briefly to pick up a prescription. Mara's heart fluttered, memories of anxiety and past threats pressed against her mind. But she took a deep breath and recalled every lesson Karen, Leo, and Marco had taught her. She entered the cafe, her posture upright, movements deliberate. Inside, the world moved at its usual pace. The clink of cups, the low hum of conversation, the occasional bark of a bicycle bell outside. Mara navigated to the counter, collected her prescription, and returned to the street without incident. Outside, Marco offered a quiet nod of approval. "See? You've got this," he said. Mara exhaled, a small smile breaking through. The first real test was behind her, and she had met it with composure. Finn, driving the escort vehicle a short distance behind, glanced in the rearview mirror, noting her calm demeanor. Leo, observing from his motorcycle ahead, signaled that all was clear. The disciplined vigilance of the team remained, but Mara had begun to internalize the strength and security they had instilled. The next leg of the route brought Mara past a busier intersection. Her heart pounded as she navigated the crosswalk, cars slowing to let her pass. For a moment, a memory of fear flared. Travis, shouting, threatening, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the rhythm of her own steps and the supportive presence of the riders around her. Diesel maintained a subtle watch from the sidewalk, adjusting his position to create a visible, protective presence without overwhelming her. Mara realized that safety could coexist with independence. The two were no longer contradictory. At a small park halfway through the route, Mara paused to rest on a bench. The sunlight filtered through budding trees, casting dappled shadows across the path. Jonas approached carrying a thermos of tea. "Hydrate," he said simply. Mara accepted, sipping slowly and observing the world around her. She noticed children playing, couples walking dogs, and the quiet energy of ordinary life, the normalcy she had been denied for so long. For the first time, she could exist in this space without immediate fear, her awareness a tool, not a prison. Karen called from a nearby bench, her voice calm and encouraging. You're doing exactly what we've practiced. Each decision, each observation, each step reinforces your control. Notice how your body reacts, and let awareness guide you rather than anxiety. Mara nodded, feeling a profound sense of empowerment. She realized that the lessons she had learned, the observation techniques, the measured breathing, the careful use of her senses, were not just temporary skills but tools for reclaiming her life. The final checkpoint was Mara's return to the garage. As she approached, a wave of relief washed over her. She had navigated the streets, maintained composure, and relied on her training, all while supported subtly by the Steelhawks. Each biker's presence, disciplined and morally grounded, had been a silent pillar beneath her, yet she had led the journey. Diesel, Marco, Finn, Leo, Jonas, and Wrench greeted her with quiet nods, their expressions a mixture of approval and pride. Mara sank onto the cot, warmth from the space heater enveloping her. I I did it, she whispered, her voice trembling but strong. Marco crouched beside her. Yes, you did, and each time will get easier. You're building not just safety, but confidence. That's the real victory. Karen smiled, handing her a notebook. Document everything. How you felt, how you responded, what you noticed. These reflections are as important as the practical measures. They reinforce mental strength and self-awareness. Mara settled in, her body still trembling slightly from the adrenaline and focus required, but her mind clearer than it had been in months. She realized that the Steel Hawks had given her more than protection. They had taught her to trust herself, to act with awareness, and to reclaim her autonomy. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the careful orchestration that allowed a woman to regain control of her life. Inside the garage, a quiet sense of triumph pervaded. Mara had faced the world and returned, stronger, wiser, and safe under the watchful yet unobtrusive guidance of the bikers who had become her guardians. Evening had settled over the city, painting the streets with amber lights that reflected off wet pavement and polished motorcycles outside the garage. Inside the Steel Hawk sanctuary, the hum of heaters and the faint scent of leather created a cocoon of warmth and security. Mara sat on her cot, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea and reflecting on the journey of the past days. The fear, the uncertainty, and now the sense of empowerment that had gradually replaced it. Leo approached first, his presence calm and measured. How do you feel? He asked softly. Mara smiled a little wistfully. I feel safe. For the first time in months, I feel like I can actually breathe without fear pressing down. Marco crouched beside her, nodding. That's exactly what we hope for. Safety isn't just walls or patrols. It's knowing you can face the world with awareness and trust in yourself. Mara took a deep breath, letting the warmth from the heater seep into her shoulders. Diesel and Wrench moved quietly around the garage, adjusting blankets and checking supplies, their movements precise, disciplined, and reassuring. Jonas cleaned a motorcycle, its polished chrome reflecting the soft glow of the overhead lights. Finn monitored the security cameras, scanning for any disturbances, while Karen organized documents on the workbench, her calm energy a grounding presence. Mara watched them all, realizing that each action, each gesture, each careful motion was a part of the moral fabric that had become her shield. I want to thank all of you, Mara said, her voice shaking with emotion. You didn't just protect me. You taught me how to protect myself, how to trust, and how to believe that life outside fear is possible. Leo smiled faintly. That's why we do it, he said. We're a team, a club, yes. But more than that, we stand for loyalty, responsibility, and moral courage. We don't abandon people when they're vulnerable. You've just seen that in action. Karen leaned forward, her eyes kind but steady. Remember, Mara, the legal measures are important, but so is your mental strength. You've learned awareness, discipline, and how to make decisions under pressure. Those lessons are yours forever. They can never be taken away. Mara nodded, feeling the weight of the words sink in. For the first time, she realized that her safety was not just external. It was internal, rooted in knowledge, practice, and trust. Finn approached, offering a small, warm smile. "And remember," he said gently, "we'll always be here if you need us. But you've proven you can face challenges, navigate risks, and make choices that keep you safe. That's the true measure of strength." Mara's eyes glistened with gratitude. The thought that she could exist independently, yet still have a network of loyal allies ready to step in, was a revelation. The group gathered near the motorcycles, a quiet but powerful display of unity. Each rider's posture reflected experience, discipline, and moral responsibility. Mara stood in the center, surrounded by their calm authority and unwavering loyalty. "I don't know how I can ever repay you," she whispered. Marco shook his head. "You don't need to. Just living your life with awareness, confidence, and courage. That's enough. That's what we stand for." Outside, the city continued its rhythm, unaware of the journey that had taken place inside this garage. A journey from fear to empowerment, from vulnerability to self-assuredness. Mara felt a profound sense of gratitude, but also a deep understanding. Her life was no longer dictated by fear. She had allies, knowledge, and the moral guidance of people who lived by a code of loyalty and responsibility. As night deepened, Mara returned to her cot, the gentle hum of the heaters surrounding her like a shield. She closed her eyes, reflecting on every step. The first knock on the garage door, the warmth and protection of the bikers, the careful planning of routes, the lessons in awareness, and the first fully independent journey through the streets. Every challenge had been met, every fear addressed, and every moment reinforced by the steady presence of those who acted with discipline and moral courage. Finally, Mara whispered to herself, a small smile spreading across her face. "I can do this. I can live without fear." And in that moment, the garage was not just a physical refuge. It was a symbol of trust, loyalty, and moral responsibility. The Steel Hawks had transformed her life, not just by keeping her safe, but by showing her the path to self-reliance, courage, and hope. As the last rays of light faded and the night settled fully over the city, Mara drifted into sleep, secure in the knowledge that she had survived, learned, and grown. Outside, the motorcycles gleamed silently under the streetlights, each rider standing watch with disciplined vigilance, moral integrity, and unwavering loyalty. Inside, Mara dreamed of a life reclaimed, a future where fear no longer ruled, and where courage, trust, and the strength of human connection guided every step. In the quiet stillness of the Steelhawks garage, the lesson was clear. True strength comes from courage, discipline, and the moral responsibility we show to those who cannot protect themselves. Mara had experienced it firsthand, and her life was forever changed.